March 8, 1944. The skies over Berlin. Luftwaffe pilots intercepted a formation of American heavy bombers escorted by something new, a massive fighter they had never encountered in numbers before. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. German intelligence reports from earlier that year had dismissed the aircraft. Too heavy, too large. Built like a flying milk bottle, one Luftwaffe briefing noted. The Focke-Wulf 190 and Messerschmitt 109 were lighter, more agile, and battle-tested over Europe for years. But within minutes, 8 Luftwaffe fighters fell from the sky. The P-47 had just announced itself, not through elegance, but through overwhelming firepower and engineering that German pilots had fatally underestimated. This is the story of the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, a fighter aircraft that entered the European theater under a cloud of mockery and skepticism, only to become one of the most lethal weapons in the Allied arsenal. German pilots called it the Jug, short for juggernaut, a term that began as an insult but evolved into grudging respect. The P-47 weighed nearly 8 tons fully loaded, more than twice the weight of early Spitfires. It looked slow. It looked clumsy. And to Luftwaffe veterans accustomed to dogfighting in nimble aircraft, it looked like an easy target. They were catastrophically wrong. By the end of World War II, the P-47 Thunderbolt had destroyed more enemy aircraft in air-to-air combat than any other American fighter in the European theater. It had flown more than 500,000 sorties. And it had proven that firepower, protection, and engineering could triumph over agility when applied with precision and overwhelming force. This is the documented account of how the most underestimated fighter of World War II became the Luftwaffe's nightmare. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt entered operational service with the 8th Air Force in April 1943. Its arrival was met with mixed reactions, not just from the enemy, but from Allied pilots themselves. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabreski, who would become the top P-47 ace in Europe, later recalled in a 1989 oral history archived by the Air Force Historical Research Agency. "When I first saw the P-47, I thought someone made a mistake. It was huge. I'd been flying P-40s, and this thing looked like a tank with wings." The statistics supported that impression. The P-47D, the most common variant, weighed 17,500 pounds at maximum takeoff weight. It measured over 36 feet, long with a wingspan exceeding 40 feet. Its Pratt Whitney R2800 double wasp engine and 18-cylinder radial power plant generated 2,000 horsepower. German intelligence officers studied reconnaissance photographs of American airfields in England throughout early 1943. Luftwaffe tactical reports from May 1943, now declassified and held in the German Federal Archives, described the P-47 as grosser amerikanischer Jäger, large, American fighter, and noted its apparent lack of maneuverability compared to German designs. One Luftwaffe briefing document dated June 12, 1943, assessed the threat level of the new American fighter. The report concluded, the aircraft's size and weight suggest limited climbing ability and turning radius. Engaging at low altitude or in tight maneuvers should favor our lighter fighters. That assessment would cost the Luftwaffe dearly. What German intelligence failed to recognize or chose to dismiss was the P-47's armament. 8 Browning M2.50 caliber machine guns, 4 mounted in each wing. Each gun capable of firing 750 to 850 rounds per minute. Together, the 8 guns delivered a combined rate of fire exceeding 6,000 rounds per minute. The ammunition load varied by mission, but a standard combat load carried 3,400 rounds total. That meant the P-47 could sustain continuous fire for approximately 30 seconds before exhausting its ammunition, an eternity in aerial combat where engagements often lasted mere seconds. The Luftwaffe was about to discover what 100 pounds of lead per second could do. The P-47's combat debut over Europe began cautiously. Throughout April and May 1943, the 8th Air Force deployed Thunderbolts on short-range escort missions, gradually extending their operational reach as pilots familiarized themselves with the aircraft. Luftwaffe pilots encountered the P-47 in limited numbers during these early months. Combat reports from Jagdgeschwader 26, one of the Luftwaffe's most experienced fighter wings, describe initial engagements with what they termed the new heavy fighter. A combat report filed by Oberleutnant Adolf Glunz on May 4, 1943, archived in Bundesarchiv records, provides insight into German tactical thinking. Glunz reported engaging a formation of P-47s escorting B-17 bombers near the Belgian coast. His report states, attempted vertical scissors maneuver. American fighter did not follow into climb. Engaged from superior altitude, American broke away using dive speed. No conclusive result. This pattern repeated throughout May and into June. Luftwaffe pilots attempted to exploit what they believed was the P-47's weakness, its weight and size, by forcing it into turning fights where lighter German fighters held the advantage. But American pilots were learning. The 8th Air Force issued tactical bulletins based on combat experience. A directive dated June 18, 1943, from 8th Fighter Command, now held in the National Archives, instructed P-47 pilots, do not attempt sustained turning combat with enemy fighters. Use speed and diving ability. Engage from altitude advantage. Disengage through high-speed dive, if pressed. The P-47's design allowed it to execute this strategy with devastating effectiveness. The massive radial engine sat in front of the pilot, providing an additional layer of protection. The cockpit armor plate measured half an inch thick. The self-sealing fuel tanks, distributed throughout the fuselage and wings, could absorb significant battle damage. Major Gerald Johnson, who scored 16 aerial victories in the P-47, explained the aircraft's diving capability in a 1944 interview preserved by the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. The Thunderbolt could outdive anything the Germans had. You could push that nose down and the airspeed would build up to 500 miles per hour or more. No Messerschmitt or Focke-Wulf could follow you through that without risking structural failure. German pilots discovered this the hard way. Luftwaffe loss records from July 1943 show a marked increase in fighters reported loss during pursuit of enemy aircraft. The Luftwaffe's investigative body, the Untersuchungsausschuss responsible for analyzing aircraft losses, noted several cases where German fighters disintegrated during high-speed dives while attempting to follow American aircraft. The P-47's structural strength came from its design philosophy. Republic Aviation's chief designer, Alexander Kartveli, had engineered the aircraft around the massive Pratt and Whitney engine and a turbo supercharger system located in the rear fuselage. This required a robust airframe capable of handling extreme stresses. That robustness translated into combat survivability. By August 1943, the 8th Air Force had accumulated sufficient combat data to assess the P-47's performance. A report issued by 8th Fighter Command on August 15, 1943, documented 89 confirmed aerial victories by P-47 units against 29. P-47s lost in air-to-air combat a kill ratio exceeding 3-to-1. German commanders noticed. A Luftwaffe tactical assessment from Jagdfliegerführer Mittelrhein Fighter Command Central Rhine dated September 3, 1943, warned its pilots. The American P-47 possesses considerable firepower and structural strength. Frontal attacks are not advised. Engagement from advantageous altitude and speed is essential. Avoid prolonged pursuit in dives. But warnings on paper could not change the tactical reality the Luftwaffe faced. German fighters were tasked with stopping American bomber formations before they reached their targets. That mission required aggressive interception, often from disadvantageous positions. The P-47's 8.50 caliber machine guns excelled in exactly this environment. Each Browning M2 machine gun fired a projectile weighing 1.6 ounces at a muzzle velocity of 2,900 feet per second. The kinetic energy delivered by a single round exceeded 13,000 foot-pounds. When 8 guns fired simultaneously, the impact on a target was catastrophic. Gun camera footage from P-47 combat missions, preserved in the National Archives, shows the devastating effect of massed .50 caliber fire. German fighters caught in sustained bursts, even for 1 or 2 seconds, suffered catastrophic damage. Wings separated from fuselages, engines disintegrated, fuel tanks exploded. Lieutenant Colonel Hub Zemke, commander of the 56th Fighter Group, the highest-scoring P-47 unit in the European theater, described the firepower in a post-war interview recorded in Focke-Wulf. 1962. You didn't need a long burst. If you hit something with all 8 guns, it came apart. I saw Focke-Wulfs literally disintegrate. The .50 caliber was brutally effective. Zemke's unit, nicknamed Zemke's Wolfpack, would ultimately destroy 674 enemy aircraft during the war, more than any other American fighter group in Europe. By the fall of 1943, the tactical equation had shifted. What the Luftwaffe initially dismissed as a clumsy, oversized fighter had proven to be a resilient gun platform, capable of dominating the skies through firepower and structural superiority. The Germans' mockery was turning into a crisis. October 1943 marked a turning point in the air war over Europe. The 8th Air Force launched a series of deep penetration raids into Germany, targeting ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt and other critical industrial sites. These missions pushed beyond the range of existing escort fighters, except the P-47. With the addition of external fuel tanks, the P-47 extended its combat radius to nearly 475 miles. This allowed American fighters to escort bombers deeper into German airspace than ever before. For the Luftwaffe, this development eliminated the safe zone where they had previously operated without fear of fighter interference. The second Schweinfurt raid on October 14, 1943, demonstrated both the necessity and limitations of fighter escort. The mission, designated Black Thursday in 8th Air Force records, resulted in the loss of 60 B-17 bombers and 600 aircrew. P-47s provided escort to the limit of their range, but German fighters attacked with overwhelming force once the escorts turned back. A Luftwaffe operational report from Jagdgeschwader 1, dated October 15, 1943, describes the German tactical approach. Concentrated attacks were made after American escort fighters departed. Fighter formations numbering 40 to 60 aircraft engaged bomber formations in waves. Losses were sustained, but mission effectiveness was achieved. The report acknowledges moderate to heavy losses among German fighters, but does not specify numbers. Post-war analysis of Luftwaffe loss records indicates approximately 35 to 38 German fighters were destroyed during the Schweinfurt mission, many during the early phases when P-47 escorts were still present. Captain Walker Mayerin, who scored 21 aerial victories flying P-47s, described the escort missions in a 1988 oral history preserved by the Library of Congress. We knew we couldn't stay with the bombers all the way. Our job was to break up the German formations before they could organize mass attacks. We'd hit them on the way in, break up their assembly, and force them to attack piecemeal. This strategy required aggressive tactics. P-47 units began implementing fire sweeps, flying ahead of bomber formations to engage German fighters before they could reach the bombers. The tactic exploited the P-47's strengths: speed, altitude performance, and overwhelming firepower. The P-47's turbo-supercharger system allowed it to maintain engine performance at altitudes exceeding 30,000 feet. This was critical over Germany, where bomber formations typically operated between 25,000 and 30,000 feet. German fighters climbing to intercept altitude faced P-47s, attacking from above, the most advantageous position in aerial combat. Luftwaffe pilots found themselves in an impossible tactical situation. A combat report from Major Heinz Bauer, a Luftwaffe ace with over 200 victories, dated November 7, 1943, reveals the German frustration. The report, held in German military archives, states, "American escort fighters engage from superior altitude with significant speed advantage. Our fighters climbing to bomber altitude are vulnerable during the climb. Casualties among experienced pilots are increasing." The statistics supported Burr's assessment. Luftwaffe pilot losses accelerated through the fall of 1943. The German fighter force was suffering unsustainable attrition, not just in aircraft, but in trained, experienced pilots who required years to replace. By contrast, the United States was producing P-47s at an extraordinary rate. Republic Aviation's factory in Farmingdale, New York, along with a second facility in Evansville, Indiana, manufactured 15,686 P-47 Thunderbolts during the war. At peak production in 1944, factories delivered more than 1,000 aircraft per month. The Luftwaffe could not match this production. Germany produced approximately 20,000 Messerschmitt Bf-109s and 13,000 Focke-Wulf FW-190s during the entire war. But these totals were spread across all fronts: Eastern, Western, Mediterranean, and homeland defense. Colonel Hubert Zemck recognized the strategic implication. In a tactical report submitted to 8th Fighter Command in December 1943, Zemck wrote, "The German fighter force is engaged in a war of attrition it cannot win. Our replacement rate exceeds their production capacity. Our pilot training program is producing combat-ready aviators in months, while German training has been reduced due to fuel shortages and the need for immediate replacements." Zemck's analysis proved prophetic. Through the winter of 1943 and into early 1944, P-47 units refined their tactics. The 8th Air Force expanded from 3 P-47 fighter groups in the summer of 1943 to 7 groups by March 1944. This force multiplication allowed for more comprehensive escort coverage and more aggressive offensive operations. The P-47's armament proved devastatingly effective against all German fighter types. Gun camera analysis conducted by the 8th Air Force Gunnery Section, documented in reports from early 1944, showed that successful deflection shots firing at targets moving across the line of sight required an average of 2 to 3 seconds of sustained fire with multiple guns hitting the target. The P-47's 8-gun battery provided significant advantage in these scenarios. With 8 guns firing simultaneously, the probability of multiple hits increased dramatically compared to fighters armed with 4 or fewer guns. Even if only half the guns scored hits during a brief firing opportunity, the 4.50 caliber rounds striking a target were often sufficient to cause critical damage. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabreski, the top P-47 ace in Europe with 28 confirmed victories, explained his gunnery technique in a 1945 debriefing. "I tried to get close within 300 yards or less before firing. At that range, you didn't need to lead the target as much, and the .50 calibers hit with tremendous force. I aimed for the cockpit or engine. One good burst was usually enough. Gabreski's success rate validated this approach. His combat record shows that of his 28 aerial victories, 26 were achieved with single engagement attacks. He rarely needed multiple passes to destroy a target, a testament to both his marksmanship and the P-47's firepower. By March 1944, the Luftwaffe faced a crisis. American bomber raids were intensifying. Fighter escorts were becoming more numerous and more aggressive. And the P-47 Thunderbolt, initially dismissed as too clumsy to be effective, was systematically destroying Germany's fighter force. A Luftwaffe operational assessment from JAG-Corps I, dated March 20, 1944, acknowledged the deteriorating situation. American fighter superiority over the Reich is increasing. Our losses in trained pilots exceed replacement capability. Engaging enemy bomber formations now results in prohibitive casualties among our fighter units. The document recommended defensive tactics. Avoid direct engagement with escorts. Focus attacks on bomber formations showing weakness and preserve experienced pilots for critical interceptions. These were the tactics of a force acknowledging defeat. The aircraft the Germans had mocked was now forcing them into survival mode. February 20th through 25th, 1944. Operation Argument, known to history as Big Week. The 8th Air Force, joined by the 15th Air Force operating from Italy, launched a coordinated campaign against German aircraft production facilities. The objective was clear: destroy the Luftwaffe's ability to manufacture fighters. The secondary objective was equally important: force the remaining German fighters into battle, where American escort fighters could destroy them. The P-47 played the central role in this strategy. Over 6 days, the 8th Air Force dispatched more than 3,300 heavy bomber sorties against 12 major targets across Germany. P-47 units flew more than 2,200 escort and fighter sweep sorties during the same period, according to 8th Air Force operational summaries archived in the National Archives. The numbers tell the story of an aerial campaign, unprecedented in scale and intensity. On February 20th, the opening day, P-47 units from the 56th, 78th, and 353rd Fighter Groups escorted bomber formations to targets near Leipzig. Luftwaffe fighters rose to defend the industrial targets in force. The ensuing air battles spread across hundreds of miles of German airspace. The 56th Fighter Group alone claimed 24 German fighters destroyed on that single day. The group's war diary, preserved at the Air Force Historical Research Agency, records the engagement. Multiple large formations of enemy aircraft encountered. Engagements from 28,000 feet down to deck level. All pilots returned safely. No bombers lost to fighter attack in our sector. That final sentence revealed Big Week's effectiveness. The bomber formations under P-47 escort sustained minimal losses, while German fighters suffered catastrophic casualties attempting to break through the escorts. Luftwaffe records from Big Week, compiled post-war by Allied intelligence, document the German fighter force lost approximately 450 aircraft during the 6-day operation. More critically, the Luftwaffe lost over 300 pilots killed, missing, or severely wounded. This represented nearly 1/5 of the Luftwaffe's total single-engine fighter pilot strength. The casualty rate among experienced German pilots was even worse. Major Gunther Roll, a Luftwaffe ace with 275 confirmed victories, described the situation in a post-war interview conducted in 1974. Big Week was a catastrophe for us. We lost pilots who had survived years of combat on the Eastern Front. The Americans attacked in overwhelming numbers with superior aircraft. The P-47 especially, we could not match its firepower or its durability. Roll's testimony is particularly significant because he was one of the Luftwaffe's most successful fighter pilots. His acknowledgement of American superiority reflected the broader recognition within the German fighter force that the tactical situation had become untenable. The P-47's performance during Big Week validated every design decision Alexander Kartveli had made. The massive radial engine absorbed tremendous battle damage and continued operating. Multiple P-47s returned to bases in England with cylinders shot away, oil lines severed, and sections of cowling missing, yet the engines continued running. One documented case involved Captain Robert S. Johnson of the 56th Fighter Group on June 26, 1943, several months before Big Week, but exemplifying the aircraft's resilience. Johnson's P-47 was attacked by a Focke-Wulf 190 flown by Oberfeldwebel Egenmeyer, one of Germany's most skilled pilots. Johnson's aircraft absorbed more than 200 hits from 20mm cannon shells and machine gun fire. His cockpit canopy shattered. His controls were damaged. Fuel streamed from his ruptured tanks. Yet the P-47 continued flying. Johnson escaped by diving away at maximum speed, a maneuver the pursuing German could not match without risking structural failure. Johnson returned to base and landed safely. His aircraft was repaired and returned to service. This incident, documented in official combat reports and Johnson's own memoir, illustrated why Luftwaffe pilots increasingly feared the Thunderbolt. You could hit it repeatedly, and it would keep flying. During Big Week, this durability saved countless American pilots. The 8th Air Force's loss records from February 20th to 25th, 1944, show that of the P-47s hit by enemy fire during the operation, more than 70% returned to base. Many required extensive repairs, but the pilots survived and the aircraft could be rebuilt. By contrast, German fighters struck by the P-47's concentrated .50 or caliber fire rarely survived the encounter intact. Gun camera footage from Big Week, analyzed by the 8th Air Force Operational Analysis Section in March 1944, showed that when P-47 pilots achieved solid hits with multiple guns, the target aircraft typically broke apart within seconds. The footage documented wings separating, fuselages rupturing, and immediate fires, all indicators of catastrophic structural failure. The report concluded, the 8-gun armament of the P-47 provides decisive killing power. Engagements requiring multiple attack passes are rare. First attack success rate exceeds 60% when guns achieve target impact. This efficiency translated into pilot confidence. Colonel Zemke noted in a February 28, 1944, after-action report, "Our pilots enter combat knowing their aircraft can absorb damage and their weapons can destroy any target. This psychological advantage cannot be overstated." German pilots are increasingly reluctant to engage, particularly when outnumbered. The Luftwaffe's own records confirmed Zemke's observation. A tactical directive issued by Luftwaffe High Command on February 27, 1944, instructed fighter units, when encountering superior numbers of enemy fighters, withdraw and regroup. Do not accept combat at disadvantageous odds. Preserve aircraft and pilots for defense of critical targets. This directive represented a complete reversal of German fighter doctrine, which had previously emphasized aggressive engagement under all circumstances. The Luftwaffe was no longer contesting air superiority. It was trying to survive. The strategic impact extended beyond the immediate air battles. The factories targeted during Big Week sustained significant damage, though not all were destroyed. However, the attrition inflicted on the Luftwaffe fighter force created a cascading effect. With fewer fighters available to defend German airspace, subsequent American bombing raids encountered reduced opposition. This allowed bomber crews to focus more effectively on their targets and reduced American bomber losses. By March 1944, the 8th Air Force had achieved air superiority over Western Europe. German fighters still contested American raids, but they no longer possessed the strength to prevent the bombers from reaching their targets. The aircraft that German intelligence had dismissed as too clumsy for effective combat had become the instrument of Germany's aerial defeat. General Adolf Galland, who commanded the Luftwaffe's fighter forces from 1941 to 1945, wrote in his post-war memoir, "The arrival of the P-47 and P-51 in numbers over Germany marked the end of the Luftwaffe's ability to defend the Reich. We could no longer prevent the enemy from attacking at will. The American fighters, particularly the heavily armed P-47, could not be driven from our skies." Big Week proved Galland's assessment. The Thunderbolt had shredded any remaining illusions of German air superiority. March 1944. As the 8th Air Force secured air superiority over Germany, the P-47 revealed another dimension of its capability: ground attack. The same characteristics that made the P-47 effective in air-to-air combat: rugged construction, powerful engine, and heavy armament, made it exceptionally lethal against ground targets. What began as secondary missions soon evolved into a primary role that terrorized German ground forces. The P-47 could carry significant ordnance loads. In addition to its 8.50 caliber machine guns, external hardpoints allowed for 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets or up to 2,500 pounds of bombs. This combination of firepower made the P-47 one of the most effective ground attack aircraft in the Allied arsenal. The 9th Air Force, formed in October 1943 to provide tactical air support for ground operations, received P-47s in large numbers. These units would spearhead the air campaign supporting the D-Day invasion and subsequent operations across France and Germany. The effectiveness of the P-47 in ground attack became evident during pre-invasion operations. In the spring of 1944, Operation Chattanooga Choo Choo, conducted in May 1944, targeted French railway infrastructure to disrupt German logistics before the Normandy invasion. P-47 units from the 9th Air Force attacked rail yards, locomotives, bridges, and supply depots across northern France. 9th Air Force operational reports from May 1944 document the results. More than 400 locomotives destroyed or damaged, 36 major rail bridges rendered impassable, and hundreds of railway cars destroyed. The P-47's ability to deliver accurate rocket and bomb attacks, combined with devastating strafing runs, created transportation chaos for German forces attempting to move reinforcements. The .50 caliber machine guns proved remarkably effective against locomotives. A tactical analysis conducted by the 9th Air Force in June 1944 found that sustained fire from 4 or more .50 caliber guns could penetrate a locomotive's boiler from ranges up to 400 yards. When the boiler ruptured under pressure, the resulting explosion destroyed the locomotive and often damaged surrounding railway cars. Lieutenant Colonel William Leverett, who commanded the 37th Fighter Squadron flying P-47s, described the ground attack missions in a 1944 interview. "We'd come in low, 100 to 200 feet, and hit them with everything. The .50 cals would punch through the boilers. The rockets would tear up the tracks, and the bombs would crater the rail beds. A good strike could shut down a rail yard for days." German logistics records from the spring of 1944, captured after the war, confirmed the devastating impact. A report from German Army Group B, dated May 28, 1944, states, "Rail transport capacity reduced by approximately 40% due to enemy air attacks. Movement of armored divisions to Normandy area, delayed by 48 to 72 hours. American fighter bombers, particularly the heavily armed Thunderbolt, operate with impunity against transportation targets." This air campaign directly contributed to the success of D-Day on June 6, 1944. On D-Day itself, P-47 units flew continuous missions over the Normandy beaches. providing close air support to Allied ground forces and interdicting German reinforcements. The 9th Air Force flew more than 1,700 P-47 sorties on June 6 alone, according to official operational summaries. The ground attack capability came with risks. Low-altitude missions exposed pilots to intense anti-aircraft fire. The P-47's rugged construction again proved its worth. Pilots reported repeatedly returning to base with battle damage that would have downed lighter aircraft. The radial engine's design provided critical protection. Unlike inline engines used in aircraft like the P-51 Mustang, where a single hit to the cooling system would cause engine failure, the P-47's air-cooled radial engine could sustain damage to multiple cylinders and continue operating. Individual cylinders could be shot away entirely, and the remaining cylinders would carry the load. Major General Elwood Pete Quezada, commander of X Fighter Command, praised the P-47's survivability in a post-war report. The P-47 could take punishment that would destroy other aircraft. This gave our pilots confidence to press attacks against heavily defended targets. That aggressiveness, made possible by the aircraft's durability, multiplied our effectiveness many times over. As Allied ground forces broke out from Normandy in late July 1944, P-47 units transitioned to armed reconnaissance missions, roaming behind German lines to attack targets of opportunity. These missions devastated German logistics and mobility. The Falaise Pocket in August 1944 demonstrated this capability at its most lethal. German forces attempting to retreat through the Falaise Gap found themselves under continuous air attack. P-47s, along with other Allied fighter bombers, attacked the concentrated German columns relentlessly. The result was catastrophic for the Germans. Post-battle assessments documented at Falaise found over 10,000 German vehicles destroyed or abandoned, including tanks, trucks, artillery pieces, and support vehicles. While multiple Allied aircraft types participated in these attacks, P-47s accounted for a substantial portion of the destruction due to their superior armament and ability to operate throughout the day despite intense anti-aircraft fire. German soldiers who survived Falaise described the experience in post-war interrogations. One account from a German infantry officer interviewed in September 1944 recorded, "The American Jabos fighter bombers were everywhere. The sound of their engines was terrifying. When they attacked, you could only seek cover and pray. Their machine guns could destroy a truck in seconds. We lost entire convoys." The term Jabo, short for Jag bomber, fighter bomber, became synonymous with the P-47 in German accounts from the summer of 1944 onward. As Allied forces advanced across France and into Germany, P-47 units refined their ground attack tactics. They developed specialized techniques for attacking different target types: locomotives, vehicles, bridges, supply depots, and troop concentrations. The .50 caliber machine gun's versatility proved critical. The same weapon that shredded enemy fighters excelled against ground targets. Armor-piercing incendiary ammunition could penetrate light armor and set fuel trucks ablaze. High-explosive incendiary rounds were effective against buildings and supply concentrations. A tactical report from the 362nd Fighter Group, dated October 15, 1944, detailed the unit's destruction of a German supply convoy, attacked enemy column of approximately 50 vehicles near St. Vith, multiple firing passes conducted, observed direct hits on fuel trucks resulting in large explosions, estimated 35 to 40 vehicles destroyed or damaged. No friendly aircraft lost. These attacks inflicted more than material damage. They created psychological terror among German ground forces. German military correspondence from late 1944, captured and translated by Allied intelligence, reveals the fear P-47s inspired. A letter from a German soldier, dated November 12, 1944, states, "We can only move at night. During the day, the Thunderbolts own the sky. If you hear their engines, you have perhaps 10 seconds to find cover. I have seen entire companies scattered by a single attack. By the winter of 1944-1945, German forces in the West operated under constant threat of air attack. Daylight movement became nearly impossible in areas where Allied air superiority was established. This immobilization of German forces multiplied the effectiveness of Allied ground operations. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 provided a final demonstration of the P-47's ground attack capability. When weather cleared after the initial German offensive, Allied air power, led by massed P-47 formations, struck the German columns advancing through the Ardennes. 9th Air Force records document that between December 23, 1944 and January 3, 1945, P-47 units flew more than 10,000 sorties against German forces in the Bulge. The destruction inflicted was immense. Post-battle surveys found thousands of destroyed or abandoned German vehicles throughout the Ardennes. The German offensive, which had initially achieved surprise and significant gains, stalled in part due to the inability to move reinforcements and supplies under Allied air attack. General Hasso von Manteuffel, who commanded the 5th Panzer Army during the Bulge, stated in post-war interrogations, "The Allied air forces, once the weather cleared, made movement impossible during daylight. We could not bring up fuel or ammunition. Our tanks sat immobile, perfect targets. The fighter bombers, especially the P-47s with their heavy guns, destroyed our transport systematically. The offensive was doomed once their air power could operate." The P-47's ground attack dominance had transformed it from a mocked fighter into a weapon that German commanders feared more than almost any other Allied asset. By early 1945, the 9th Air Force operated 18 P-47 fighter groups, more than 1,200 aircraft dedicated primarily to ground attack missions. These units roamed across Germany, attacking anything that moved. Railway systems, roads, bridges, factories, and military installations all fell under constant assault. The cumulative effect paralyzed German logistics. A strategic assessment prepared by the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey after the war concluded the systematic destruction of German transportation infrastructure by Allied fighter bombers, particularly the P-47 Thunderbolt, was a decisive factor in Germany's defeat. The inability to move troops, supplies, and materiel effectively crippled German military operations in the final months of the war. The aircraft that entered service as a pure fighter had evolved into the most effective multi-role combat aircraft of the European theater. The P-47's effectiveness can be measured not just in destroyed targets, but in the combat records of the pilots who flew it. The Thunderbolt produced more American fighter aces in the European theater than any other aircraft type. An ace is a pilot credited with 5 or more aerial victories. By war's end, 477 American pilots achieved ace status flying the P-47 Thunderbolt, according to records compiled by the Air Force Historical Research Agency. These pilots accounted for more than 3,750 confirmed aerial victories between them. Colonel Francis Gabreski stood at the top of this list. Gabreski, commanding officer of the 61st Fighter Squadron within the 56th Fighter Group, achieved 28 confirmed aerial victories flying the P-47, making him the top American ace in Europe flying a single aircraft type. His combat records span from August 1943 until July 1944, when he was shot down by ground fire during a strafing mission and spent the remainder of the war as a prisoner. Gabreski's success derived from aggressive tactics and exceptional marksmanship. In his post-war debriefings, preserved in Air Force archives, he emphasized the importance of getting close before firing. "I never opened fire beyond 300 yards, and I preferred 200 yards or less. At that range, with all 8 guns hitting, the target didn't have a chance. His methodology was methodical and lethal. Combat reports from Gabreski's missions show a pattern: patient stalking, positioning for a single decisive attack, and devastating gunnery. Of his 28 victories, 24 were achieved with single attack passes. He rarely needed to pursue a target through multiple engagements. His first attack was typically fatal to the target. Lieutenant Colonel Robert S. Johnson achieved 27 confirmed victories, making him the second highest scoring P-47 ace. Johnson also flew with the 56th Fighter Group, serving in the 61st Fighter Squadron under Gabreski's command. Johnson survived the war despite flying 91 combat missions and being shot down once. His survival of the June 26, 1943, attack, where his P-47 absorbed more than 200 hits, demonstrated both the aircraft's durability and Johnson's skill as a pilot. In a 1998 interview conducted by the National Museum of the Pacific War, Johnson reflected on the P-47. People said it was too big, too heavy, but that weight saved my life more than once. The armor protected me. The engine kept running when any other aircraft would have quit. And when I pulled the trigger, whatever I was shooting at went down. The 56th Fighter Group, nicknamed Zemk's Wolfpack after its commander Colonel Hubert Zemk, established itself as the top-scoring P-47 unit in the European theater. The group's final tally: 674 enemy aircraft destroyed in air-to-air combat, along with hundreds more destroyed on the ground during strafing missions. Zemk himself achieved 17.75 aerial victories, the fraction representing a shared kill with another pilot. Beyond his personal score, Zemk's leadership and tactical innovations made the 56th Fighter Group the most effective P-47 unit in the war. Zemk emphasized disciplined formation flying and coordinated attacks. His tactical directives, preserved in the group's war diary, stressed the importance of mutual support. Never leave your wingman. 2 aircraft working together can defeat 4 aircraft operating individually. Use the P-47's strengths, speed, firepower, durability. Avoid prolonged turning fights. These tactics, adopted throughout the 8th Air Force's P-47 units, maximize the Thunderbolt's advantages while minimizing its weaknesses. Major Walker McEwen, another 56th Fighter Group pilot, scored 20.75 victories flying P-47s. McEwen's combat career included both air-to-air and ground attack missions, and he survived being shot down twice, once over France in 1944, where he evaded capture with the help of the French resistance. In his memoir, McEwen described the confidence P-47 pilots developed. "We knew we had the better aircraft. The Germans knew it too. By 1944, you could see the difference. They didn't want to fight anymore. They'd try to avoid us, hit the bombers, and run. We wouldn't let them." The 4th Fighter Group, which transitioned from Spitfires to P-47s in early 1943, initially resisted the change. Pilots accustomed to the nimble British fighter found the Thunderbolt heavy and unresponsive. But combat experience changed their assessment. Major Don Blakesley, who commanded the 4th Fighter Group, recorded his evolution in perspective in a March 1944 letter. "I hated the P-47 at first. Now I understand it. It's not a dogfighter, it's a killer. You don't dance with the enemy. You hit him with overwhelming force and superior positioning. The P-47 rewards smart tactics and punishes mistakes by the enemy." The 4th Fighter Group eventually transitioned to P-51 Mustangs in early 1944 due to the Mustang's superior range, but their months flying P-47s produced 105 aerial victories and established many of the tactical doctrines that dominated American fighter operations through the war's end. Beyond individual aces and elite units, the broader P-47 pilot community achieved remarkable results. Statistical analysis conducted by the Air Force's Operational Analysis Section in 1945 examined the combat effectiveness of different fighter types. The study found that P-47 pilots achieved an average kill-to-loss ratio of 4.6 to 1 in air-to-air combat throughout the European campaign, meaning that for every P-47 lost in aerial combat, American pilots destroyed an average of 4.6 enemy aircraft. This ratio improved over time as pilots gained experience and tactics evolved. By 1944, the ratio exceeded 7 to 1 according to quarterly combat assessments. The P-47's effectiveness extended beyond the European theater. In the Pacific, the 5th Air Force under General George Kenney employed P-47s extensively in ground attack and air superiority roles. While the P-47 is less known for its Pacific service, it achieved significant success against Japanese forces. Colonel Neil Kirby, flying P-47s with the 5th Air Force, achieved 22 confirmed victories against Japanese aircraft before being killed in action in March 1944. Kirby received the Medal of Honor for a mission on October 11, 1943, where he single-handedly attacked a formation of Japanese aircraft and destroyed 6 confirmed enemy planes in one engagement. The citation for Kirby's Medal of Honor, archived in the National Archives, describes the action. Colonel Kirby voluntarily led a flight of 4 fighters against a Japanese formation of 12 bombers and 36 fighters. In the ensuing engagement, Colonel Kirby personally destroyed 3 bombers and 3 fighters, demonstrating extraordinary heroism and disregard for personal safety. The P-47's success in the Pacific validated its effectiveness across different operational environments and against different adversaries. By May 1945, when Germany surrendered, the P-47 Thunderbolt had established itself as one of the most successful fighter aircraft in history. The statistics compiled by the U.S. Army Air Forces tell the story: 3,752 aerial victories in the European theater, 3,202 aircraft destroyed on the ground, 9,000 locomotives destroyed, 86,000 railway cars destroyed, 6,000 armored vehicles destroyed, more than 1.9 million combat sorties flown. These numbers represent more than abstract statistics. They represent German fighters that never intercepted bombers, trains that never delivered supplies, and tanks that never reached the battlefield. The pilots who flew the P-47 transformed an aircraft initially mocked for its size and weight into the most feared American fighter over Europe. Their skill, courage, and tactical innovation, combined with the Thunderbolt's raw capability, achieved air superiority and shattered German logistics. What began as mockery ended as respect born from brutal experience. The P-47 Thunderbolt's combat success stemmed from deliberate engineering decisions made years before the first shot was fired in anger. Understanding these design choices reveals why this aircraft performed so effectively when others initially predicted failure. Republic Aviation's chief designer, Alexander Kartveli, began work on what would become the P-47 in 1940. The U.S. Army Air Corps had issued requirements for a new fighter incorporating lessons learned from early European combat reports. The specifications emphasized firepower, speed, altitude performance, and durability. Kartveli made a foundational decision that defined the entire aircraft. He would design around the most powerful engine available, the Pratt Whitney R-2800 double wasp radial engine. The R-2800 was an 18-cylinder, 2-row radial engine capable of producing 2,000 horsepower. This was extraordinary power for 1940. However, the engine was massive, 56 inches in diameter and weighing 2,360 pounds. Building an effective fighter around such a large, heavy power plant presented significant challenges. Kartveli's solution was to embrace the engine's size rather than fight against it. He designed a large airframe that could accommodate the engine. Heavy armament, armor protection, substantial fuel capacity, and a turbo-supercharger system to maintain performance at high altitude. The result was an aircraft that weighed more than any previous American fighter, but one that integrated all its systems into a coherent, effective design. The turbo-supercharger proved crucial to the P-47's success. This device, manufactured by General Electric, compressed intake air to maintain sea-level air density at high altitudes. Without it, piston engines lose power as altitude increases due to thinner air. With it, the R2800 could maintain full power output well above 30,000 feet. The turbo-supercharger installation required careful engineering. The unit was mounted in the rear fuselage, connected to the engine by ducting that ran along the bottom of the aircraft. Exhaust gases from the engine drove the turbine, which compressed fresh air and fed it back to the engine's intake. This system gave the P-47 a decisive altitude advantage over most German fighters, which used mechanical superchargers that were less efficient at extreme altitudes. Above 28,000 feet, the P-47 could outperform virtually any Luftwaffe fighter in level flight and climbing ability. The tactical implications were profound. A technical report from Wright Field, the Army Air Force's testing center, dated November 1942, evaluated the P-47B's performance. The report documented, at 30,000 feet, the XP-47B achieves a maximum speed of 429 miles per hour. Rate of climb at this altitude remains positive at 1,500 feet per minute. Performance exceeds all other tested fighter types at equivalent altitudes. Combat experience validated these test results. German fighters attempting to engage P-47 formations at 30,000 feet found themselves at a severe disadvantage. The P-47S operated in their optimal performance envelope, while German fighters struggled with reduced engine power and sluggish handling at the edge of their performance limits. The armament system represented another engineering achievement. Installing 8.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns in the wings required solving complex problems of weight distribution, ammunition feed, synchronization, and structural integrity. Each gun weighed 64 pounds. Ammunition added hundreds of additional pounds. The complete armament system, including guns, ammunition, feed mechanisms, and firing systems, exceeded 1,200 pounds. Republic's engineers distributed this weight across the wing structure to maintain proper center of gravity and avoid compromising the wing's structural strength. The ammunition boxes were positioned inboard, closest to the fuselage, while the guns extended outward into the wings. This arrangement minimized the impact on the aircraft's roll rate critical for maneuvering in combat. The gun installation incorporated advanced features for its era. Each gun could be fired independently or in groups, controlled by switches in the cockpit. Most pilots, however, used the master trigger that fired all 8 guns simultaneously. The psychological and physical impact of 8 guns firing together proved more effective than any incremental advantage from selective fire. The ammunition feed system required particular attention. High-G maneuvers could cause ammunition feed interruptions in poorly designed systems. Republic's engineers developed a feed mechanism that maintained reliability even during extreme maneuvers. Combat reports from throughout the war show remarkably few instances of gun jams or feed failures in the P-47, a testament to the system's robust design. The structural strength of the P-47 derived from design philosophy emphasizing survivability. The airframe was built around a strong center section that carried the engine, cockpit, and main landing gear. This structure was heavily reinforced and designed to absorb battle damage without catastrophic failure. The wings attached to this center section with substantial fittings capable of handling extreme loads. wind tunnel testing and structural analysis conducted at Republic's facility in Farmingdale documented the airframe's capabilities. The P-47 was cleared for dive speeds up to 550 miles per hour, unprecedented for fighters of that era. This capability allowed the P-47 to escape almost any situation by diving away at speeds German fighters could not match. The pilot protection systems integrated into the design saved countless lives. Behind the pilot's seat sat a 3/8-inch armor plate measuring approximately 1 foot by 1.5 feet. This steel plate could stop rifle-caliber rounds and protect against most machine gun fire from behind. Additional armor protected the sides of the cockpit and the front, where a thick bulletproof windscreen provided visibility while stopping small arms fire. The self-sealing fuel tanks represented critical protection technology. These tanks incorporated a rubber liner that would swell and seal when punctured by bullets or shell fragments. Combat reports documented numerous cases where P-47s sustained hits to fuel tanks, lost some fuel through leakage, but did not suffer fires or explosions. The self-sealing technology, combined with the placement of tanks away from the engine and cockpit where possible, dramatically reduced fire-related losses. Lieutenant Colonel Cass Hawk, who flew 104 combat missions in P-47s, described the aircraft's protection in a 1990 oral history. "I took hits on at least a dozen missions. Flak, machine gun fire, even 20mm cannon shells. The airplane brought me home every time. The armor worked. The fuel tank sealed. The engine kept running. You felt safe in a P-47, as safe as you can feel in combat." The production engineering behind the P-47 was equally impressive. Republic Aviation, along with Curtiss Wright's facility in Buffalo, produced 15,686 P-47s during the war. At peak production in early 1944, the combined facilities delivered more than 1,000 aircraft per month. This production rate required sophisticated manufacturing processes and quality control systems. Each P-47 required approximately 150,000 separate parts, assembled by thousands of workers across multiple facilities. The main assembly line at Farmingdale employed more than 25,000 workers at its peak. Components arrived from suppliers across the United States, engines from Pratt and Whitney in Connecticut, propellers from Curtiss Electric, instruments from various manufacturers. Quality control was rigorous. Each aircraft underwent extensive ground testing before its first flight, followed by multiple test flights to verify all systems operated correctly. Records from Republic show a rejection rate of less than 2% for completed aircraft, an exceptionally low rate for such complex machines produced in such quantities. The reliability of P-47s arriving at combat units reflected this manufacturing quality. Maintenance records from the 8th Air Force show that P-47s required an average of 11 maintenance man-hours per flight hour during 1944, lower than most contemporary fighters. The rugged construction and reliable systems meant that aircraft spent more time available for combat operations and less time undergoing repairs. This reliability multiplied combat effectiveness. A fighter that required constant maintenance could not contribute to missions. The P-47's dependability meant that squadrons could maintain higher operational rates, putting more aircraft over the target and increasing the force's overall impact. Major General William Kepner, commander of 8 Fighter Command from 1943 to 1944, praised the P-47's engineering in an official report dated January 1945. The P-47 Thunderbolt represents the successful integration of firepower, protection, and performance in a single airframe. Its reliability and maintainability have been exceptional. It is, quite simply, the best fighter-bomber aircraft available to Allied forces. The engineering excellence that made the P-47 effective was not accidental. It was the result of systematic design, rigorous testing, and sophisticated manufacturing. Alexander Kartveli and his team at Republic had created not just an aircraft, but a weapon system optimized for the brutal realities of aerial combat. What German pilots mocked as clumsy was actually carefully calculated engineering that prioritized combat effectiveness over aesthetic appeal. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. When the guns fell silent across the European theater, the P-47 Thunderbolt had compiled one of the most successful combat records in aviation history. The aircraft that German intelligence dismissed as too large and too clumsy had destroyed more enemy aircraft in air-to-air combat than any other American fighter in Europe. The transformation was complete. From mockery to mastery, from dismissal to dominance. The P-47's journey encapsulated a fundamental truth about warfare. Effectiveness matters more than appearance, and capability defeats assumption. The Germans had made their assessment based on doctrine and expectations shaped by years of experience with lighter, more maneuverable fighters. They looked at the P-47 specifications and saw weakness. They saw weight where they should have seen protection. They saw size where they should have seen power. They saw clumsiness where they should have seen deliberate engineering. Their mistake proved fatal to thousands of Luftwaffe pilots. The numbers tell part of the story. By war's end, P-47 pilots had destroyed 3,752 enemy aircraft in aerial combat and another 3,202 on the ground. They had demolished Germany's transportation infrastructure, destroying 9,000 locomotives and 86,000 railway cars. They had obliterated 6,000 armored vehicles and supported every major ground operation from Normandy to Germany's final collapse. But numbers alone cannot capture the psychological impact. German soldiers learned to fear the sound of the P-47's radial engine. That distinctive rumble announced the arrival of an aircraft that could not be easily shot down, could not be escaped by diving, and carried enough firepower to destroy anything it hit. Ground forces heard that sound and scattered. Fighter pilots heard it and knew they faced an opponent with every advantage except agility, and agility alone could not win battles. The P-47 changed the nature of the air war over Europe. Before its arrival in large numbers, German fighters could contest Allied bombing raids with reasonable prospects of success. After the P-47 established itself, the Luftwaffe found itself in an unwinnable war of attrition. They could no longer protect German cities from bombing. They could no longer prevent Allied fighters from ranging freely across German airspace. They could no longer move troops and supplies without constant fear of attack from above. This transformation occurred not through technological surprise, but through the application of superior engineering, production capacity, and tactical doctrine. The Germans knew about the P-47. They had studied it. They had fought it. But they could not stop it. General Adolf Galland, reflecting on the air war in his post-war memoir, acknowledged the decisive impact. The American fighters, particularly the P-47, destroyed the Luftwaffe's ability to contest air superiority. We could build aircraft, but we could not replace experienced pilots fast enough. The Americans killed our fighter force through relentless pressure and superior numbers. The P-47's firepower and durability made it the ideal weapon for this campaign of attrition. Galland's assessment identified the central reality. The P-47 was purpose-built for exactly the kind of campaign the Allies needed to wage. It could escort bombers deep into Germany. It could engage and destroy German fighters. It could absorb battle damage and return home. It could attack ground targets with devastating effectiveness. And it could be produced in quantities that overwhelmed German defensive capacity. The pilots who flew the P-47 understood its capabilities and exploited them with skill and courage. They learned to fight to the aircraft's strengths, superior altitude performance, overwhelming firepower, excellent high-speed handling, and remarkable durability. They avoided prolonged turning fights where lighter aircraft held advantage. They attacked from superior positions, hit hard, and disengaged when necessary. This tactical discipline, combined with the P-47's inherent capabilities, created a combination the Luftwaffe could not effectively counter. The legacy of the P-47 Thunderbolt extends beyond World War II. The aircraft demonstrated principles that remain relevant in military aviation. Protection matters, firepower matters, reliability matters, and production capacity matters. An aircraft doesn't need to be the fastest or the most maneuverable to be effective. It needs to be well suited to its mission and available in sufficient numbers. After the war, P-47s continued serving in air forces around the world. The aircraft remained in frontline service with some nations into the 1960s, a testament to its sound design and lasting utility. The story of the P-47 offers lessons beyond aviation history. It demonstrates the danger of underestimating opponents based on superficial assessment. The Germans looked at the P-47 and saw only its bulk. They failed to see the integrated weapon system the bulk represented: the armor, the fuel capacity, the ammunition load, the powerful engine, the sophisticated systems. It illustrates the importance of matching design to mission requirements. Republic didn't try to build the fastest fighter or most agile fighter. They built a fighter optimized for long-range escort, air superiority, and ground attack in the European theater. That focus produced an aircraft that excelled at its intended missions. And it proves that mockery is not analysis, and assumptions are not intelligence. The Luftwaffe pilots who laughed at the P-47 Thunderbolt learned this lesson under the worst possible circumstances in combat. At high altitude, with 8.50 caliber machine guns firing 6,000 rounds per minute at their aircraft. By the time they understood their mistake, it was too late. The clumsy aircraft they mocked had become the weapon that shredded their air force, destroyed their logistics, and helped defeat their nation. The transformation from mockery to terror was complete, and the thunder of the P-47's guns over Europe fell silent only when Germany itself fell silent, defeated in part by the very aircraft its pilots had dismissed as too clumsy to matter. The P-47 Thunderbolt proved that sometimes the heaviest hammer is exactly what you need.